The boarding gate was closing in 12 minutes, and Emily Carter had never felt more alone in her life. Her phone was at 2%, her bank account was nearly empty, and the airline employee had just told her that the last seat on the flight had been given away. She stood frozen beneath the harsh airport lights, gripping a small, worn suitcase with one hand and a photograph of her 8-year-old daughter with the other. Her daughter was waiting 3 states away, sick with a fever, and Emily had promised she would be home that night. Now, surrounded by hundreds of rushing strangers, she had no idea how she was going to keep that promise. If stories about kindness, second chances, and unexpected love touch your heart, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Sometimes, one small act of compassion can change an entire life. Emily had spent the entire day trying to get home. She had left her job after her manager refused to give her another emergency day off, rushed across town through heavy traffic, and arrived at the airport just as her original flight was cancelled. The replacement flight had been her final chance. She had sold her favorite necklace that morning to afford the ticket, because every dollar mattered now. Her daughter Lily had been struggling with recurring fevers, and Emily's mother, who was watching her, had called twice that afternoon saying Lily kept asking when her mother would come home. Emily had promised she would be there before bedtime. But promises did not matter to airport computers. Her name was removed from the standby list, and the gate agent apologized before turning toward the next passenger. Emily stepped aside, fighting tears. She didn't want anyone to see her break down. She had learned years ago that crying did not pay bills, fix broken cars, heal sick children, or bring back the husband who had walked away when life became difficult. She had survived by being strong, even on days when strength was the last thing she had left. Then a man standing several feet away noticed her. His name was Daniel Hayes, a 38-year-old businessman whose name appeared regularly in financial magazines. He owned a technology company, traveled constantly, and was accustomed to people recognizing him. But that evening, he wasn't paying attention to the airport screens or the executives waiting for him in another city. He was watching Emily quietly wipe a tear from her cheek while pretending nothing had happened. Daniel had no idea why her sadness affected him so deeply. Perhaps it was because he recognized that expression. His own mother had worn it when his father died, when she worked 2 jobs and still smiled at him every morning so he wouldn't understand how frightened she was. Daniel had spent his adult life building a fortune because he never wanted anyone he loved to feel helpless again. He approached Emily carefully and asked if she was all right. She immediately shook her head and said she would figure something out. Her pride wouldn't allow her to explain everything to a stranger. But when her phone finally died in her hand, the last bit of control disappeared. She sat on the nearest bench and quietly began to cry. Daniel learned that she needed to reach Denver that night because her daughter was ill. He looked at the departure board. The flight was almost completely full, but the first-class cabin still had several seats. He could have simply offered her his seat, but he knew she might refuse. Instead, he walked to the airline counter and asked what it would cost to move the remaining first-class passengers to another flight and open the cabin for the stranded passengers on standby. The agent stared at him in disbelief. Daniel didn't negotiate. He paid. Within minutes, the airline announced that several seats had become available. Emily looked up when she heard her name called. She couldn't understand how it had happened. When Daniel told her he had arranged a first-class seat for her, she immediately protested, saying she couldn't accept something that expensive from someone she barely knew. Daniel simply told her that he wasn't giving her money. He was giving her a chance to keep a promise to her daughter. That sentence broke through the wall Emily had built around herself. On the plane, Emily sat by the window, nervous and uncomfortable in a seat that felt far too luxurious for someone who had spent the morning calculating whether she could afford groceries. Daniel sat beside her, despite having other available seats. He could have enjoyed the quiet privacy of first class, but instead he wanted her to know she wasn't alone. For the first hour, they barely spoke. Emily stared through the window at the clouds while Daniel worked on his laptop. Eventually, she told him about Lily. She explained how her daughter loved astronomy, how she had drawn stars on every wall of their tiny apartment, and how she always said that stars were proof that darkness could never last forever. Daniel smiled because his mother had once told him something almost identical. As the flight continued, Emily slowly discovered that the wealthy businessman sitting beside her was not the arrogant man she had imagined. Daniel learned that Emily worked 2 jobs, had postponed her own dreams for years, and had recently started studying graphic design online at night because she hoped one day to build a better life for Lily. He asked why she had stopped. She admitted that she didn't think people like her were supposed to have dreams after 30. Daniel looked at her and quietly told her that sometimes dreams didn't disappear. Sometimes they simply waited for someone to believe in them again. When they landed, Emily rushed through the airport and found her mother waiting near the entrance. Lily was asleep in her arms. The moment Emily saw her daughter, she dropped her suitcase and pulled her close. Lily woke just enough to whisper that she knew her mother would come. Emily looked over her daughter's shoulder and saw Daniel standing several feet away. She thanked him through tears. Daniel told her she didn't owe him anything. Then he walked away. Months passed. Emily kept thinking about that night. She returned to her studies, finished her graphic design certification, and eventually began designing children's books. One of her first projects was inspired by Lily's drawings of stars. The book became unexpectedly popular, and Emily's life slowly began changing. Then one afternoon, she received an email from a publishing company offering her a contract. The company was owned by Daniel Hayes. When Emily met him again, neither of them expected what happened next. They laughed about the airport, about the first-class cabin, and about how ridiculous it had seemed for a stranger to buy an entire cabin just so one exhausted mother wouldn't have to miss her daughter. But beneath the laughter was something neither of them could ignore. Daniel had helped Emily because he saw someone who needed hope. Emily had changed Daniel because she reminded him that success meant nothing if you had nobody beside you to share it with. Over time, their friendship became something deeper. Daniel became part of Lily's world, not as someone trying to replace anyone, but as a man who showed up when he said he would. Emily continued working, continued dreaming, and continued reminding herself that accepting kindness did not make her weak. 1 year after the airport incident, Daniel took Emily and Lily back to the same terminal. He had no grand proposal planned, no cameras, and no crowd waiting. He simply gave Emily a small envelope. Inside was a photograph from that first flight, taken by an airline employee who had witnessed the unusual act of kindness. On the back Daniel had written that sometimes the most important journeys begin when everything seems to have gone wrong. Emily cried. Lily hugged them both. And beneath the same airport lights where Emily had once believed her life was falling apart, she finally understood something she had forgotten: being stranded was not always the end of the journey. Sometimes it was the moment life quietly changed direction. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps us continue sharing stories about compassion, courage, and second chances. Before you go, comment, "Kindness can change everything," if you believe one small act of kindness can become the beginning of someone's greatest second chance. Because Emily never forgot the seat Daniel bought for her that night. But more importantly, she never forgot what that seat represented. It wasn't luxury. It wasn't money. It was someone looking at a frightened stranger and saying, without expecting anything in return, "You don't have to face this moment alone." And sometimes, that is the greatest gift a person can give another human being.